I think the best way to integrate AI, especially in our context, is to treat AI as like an entity that you need to collaborate with. And so it needs to be very familiar for people, yet they need to also understand that this is not a human, like it's different. So it has like little differences, but I do think it needs to become familiar so people actually adopt it and they're not like confused by it. And it needs to be very clear what the AI is doing in real time always. You need to have this feedback loop, and you need to also make it very easy for humans to interact with it and be like, hey, no, stop. Like, I need to confirm, I need to validate this. So you need to like think about all those workflows so that the AI just doesn't take over and you have no control over it.
Welcome to another episode of Supra Insider. This time, Marc and I sat down with Steven Fabre, the founder and CEO of Liveblocks, a company that's making collaboration seamless and easy in any product. Before starting Liveblocks, Steven was a designer at Facebook, InVision, which he joined when his company Easy Design was acquired by InVision. And as you'll find out in the conversation, Steven started his career in even studying computer science and doing some lightweight development. So he's got this super interesting background. I love seeing design founders. I think companies led by designers are really interesting in general. So we went pretty deep in this conversation on the ways that Steven and his team are thinking about AI as a collaborator. I think a lot of us are thinking about that these days, and they've talked to hundreds of companies at this point, and they're building real solutions that extend the collaborative nature of Liveblocks to also include collaborating with AI, not just with other humans. We also talked about how when you're building something like Liveblocks, which gives teams all the Lego blocks they need to build collaborative experiences in their products, how that might integrate in the future where people are prototyping their ideas in Bolt, V0, Lovable, all these different other kind of products, and how to just continue to build something defensible in that world. And then lastly, we covered something that is top of mind for Marc and myself always, which is the evolving role of Figma in this world and why Figma is still the predominant place that Steven and his team choose to start drafting and prototyping and sharing their ideas with one another. I learned a lot in this conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Thanks. If you enjoy this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcasting app. Follow us on Substack. Give us a rating. It'll help us a ton and help future people discover us while also making sure you never miss an episode. Thank you. All right, Steven, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, I met your team because you all hosted an incredible dinner for some product leaders and founders here in Brooklyn, which was a fantastic, great way for me to learn about Liveblocks. And I've been wanting to chat with you since then because everyone just kept raving about you there. So just to stroke your ego to get the conversation rolling here. We wanted to dive into a lot of what you guys are thinking about these days with collaboration, but specifically how people collaborate with AI. And I think to contextualize how we talk about that space, which is top of mind for us and a lot of people right now. Could you talk a little bit about what Liveblocks is today and how you guys organically kind of started expanding into that space?
Into AI copilots, you mean, or AI? Yeah.
Yeah, helping more of your customers and just companies,
Sure.
collaborate with AI beyond
Yeah.
just collaborating with other people, which is where you guys got started.
Yeah, maybe just to rewind a little bit, I can tell a little bit about how I ended up starting the company. I'm a designer myself, worked in design tools for a while, and I used to work at a company called InVision, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with and probably used the tool. I worked on a tool called InVision Studio within that company. And for those who don't know, InVision Studio was very similar to Figma, except that it was desktop based and it used the file system, right? So when you wanted to create designs and prototypes, you basically had to save a file. And it was very hard to collaborate. Figma was starting to become very popular. A lot of people and designers and product people were using the tool. It was browser-based, fully collaborative. Basically, you could just copy a URL and be all together in one file. And that just made the collaborative workflows much better for everybody in the teams, right? And we had a project.
I don't know if you know this, but I was the product manager at Abstract, which was part of the same stack of InVision and Sketch, InVision and Abstract. And I was the PM focused on collaboration in Abstract. So We were very
so
much
like
swimming in the same waters
yeah,
at those times.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you guys can go grab some
Yeah.
drinks and talk about the aftermath of Figma.
Yes, I guess we both felt the same pain, I guess, in a way.
Totally.
But it's a good thing, because if Figma didn't exist, I would not have started Liveblocks. I started Liveblocks because, long story short, it was very complicated to turn a desktop-based application that was not really collaborative into something that was browser-based and multiplayer with like comments and notifications and all that stuff. Basically, all the features that Figma had. That eventually led me to start Liveblocks. And basically, we wanted to make it very easy for any company to add all of those collaborative features into their product, right? So things like collaborative editing in real time, like the kind of experience you have in Figma, but also tools like Google Docs, when you see when somebody's typing in real time. That's where we started. We also added a commenting system, a notification system as well, so that when you're mentioned in a text document or in a comment, then you're able to get a notification at the right time. And now we're starting to expand into what we call AI copilots. And the idea there is to make it very easy for users to collaborate not only with humans, but also with bots. We're at the beginning of this journey on the AI side of things, but yeah, happy to share more about some of the learnings there, if that's helpful.
And I think I definitely want to jump into the AI copilots, but before we get there, I want to take a little small tangent. I noticed like a lot of the logos that you have in your website are actually like AI companies. Which in a way it's surprising and not surprising at the same time. I think like Versal is one of your customers. And the reason why it's not surprising is like, I think these companies are very innovative and are always trying the latest technology. And I think they just work smarter, right? They're looking for ways to build what they want quicker. But on the other side too, like this big push, or I feel like narrative that a lot of these tools will get commoditized with AI, and why would they use a product like Liveblocks when they could just build that in 2 days or whatever, right? So I'm curious, like, what do you think are these AI tools are adopting Liveblocks and are probably like, they're so excited about it?
I think a lot of those AI tools, like, it depends on the AI tool that you're building. Like we have some companies like Krea, for instance, that use Liveblocks because they have canvas view where you can see like the visuals on like on a canvas, like creative, like in a creative canvas. And so if you start building an experience like this, like the expectation now and the baseline is to have something that behaves and works like Figma, right? So sure, you can have the AI generation piece. As soon as you start bringing more people into the tool, like I think people just expect to have the kind of experience you have in other tools, right? And I think those companies have just a tendency to, because they're new companies, it's probably easier to start with the right patterns from the beginning versus when you're like an older company, it's probably a little bit harder to retrofit those kind of features in like an old school, an old tool that's been around for like 10 or 15 years. So I would say that's one component. Yeah, and then we also have one of the big theses of Liveblocks, and something that I believe in is that I see AI as just another entity that you need to collaborate with. And so if we think about all those agents being able to use all kinds of products, I do think your app kind of has to be collaborative at some point, right? Because it's just going to be another user. It's just not a human that's going to be using the app. And so if you have 10 agents kind of working in the same file with you, like you basically need the same technology that tools like Figma have, right? Multiple people can edit the same data simultaneously. And also for people, it needs to be very clear what's actually going on when an AI is using the tool. So I don't think I answered exactly your question, but like it's a little tangent, but like...
No. Yeah, I think you did.
Yeah.
Like I think it makes a lot of sense, right? I think like you have these tools that will require collaboration, and I think that need for collaboration will only go up as you add more agents to the party. And I think there's also like I think these people are just a little bit more creative and work a little bit smarter too. So I think like instead of building something from scratch, be like, if I can use something that already exists, that's going to save me X amount of time. Like, why not?
Exactly.
Yeah, another thing I think it's also really aligned, I think, Mark, with what we've heard, I think, thematically across a bunch of the recent episodes, which is a lot of people that talk about AI as an additional teammate. They don't talk about AI as like a tool or as like, we don't talk about it like SaaS. A lot of the people we talk to, they're like, imagine it's an additional person on your team, or it's like a trusted subject matter expert or something like that. So I think the way that you're thinking about this, Steven, I think is aligned with the way a lot of the people we've been talking to think about it. I do wonder what the market thinks, right? Like because if the experts, quote unquote experts, are saying you should be thinking about it like a teammate, is that actually at odds at all with how like the people on the ground in the market are thinking right now? And I know you've been spending a lot of time there, which we'll dive into.
Yeah, that's Obviously, we still have to prove a lot of that stuff. It's a new field, so I don't think anybody can confidently say this is how it's going to work. But I'm getting very strong signals that that's what people want. And that's basically what we're trying to build. We're trying to make it very easy for users, for people to collaborate with an AI not in the same way, but in a similar way, and like in similar patterns that they used to with how they work with their colleagues. And so if you think about it that way, like for sure, I think you will definitely need in pretty much any app, like a way to ask the AI to do something. So it seems like a no-brainer to me that you'll need some type of chat interface or like a way to talk to the AI or like some way to input what you want the AI to do. And then the AI then will need to be able to understand how to use the app like a human would. And I think the closest thing I've seen to that is like OpenAI Operator.
Yeah.
It's like that, except that it's very slow because it's operating on like an image. And so it needs to understand how to move the cursor around. And I'm not sure that's necessarily the way it's going to go in the future, but the way you interact with the AI, I think is the right approach, it seems to me. But I don't know. I'm curious what you think. Yeah, what do you think?
I mean, I think that's such a good point because I think a lot for me, I think in my journey, and I think also that's probably true for other people, a lot of the way you build trust with AI is like getting exposed of how they work and operate. And I think the cool thing, right, of like being able to see, hey, like this AI agent is moving the cursor or is doing these things, right? Be able to see and have visibility on how they think, how they make decisions, how
so important.
They move things around. That is so important. And I think it just be like, okay, like now I think I understand how you operate. I don't have to watch it every time how you do it, but at least I know that if I want to, I can do it. And I think that's
exactly.
I think that's a great way to build trust. What do you think, Ben?
I think it's the human in the loop step, right? And I don't know about you guys, but the first time I sat in a Tesla that one of my friends owned, and then they turned on the full self-driving, and you go very quickly from there's no way this actually works to I cannot believe how well this works, like within seconds. And the ability to sit there and have your hands on the wheel and to be reassured that if you don't agree with what's happening, all you have to do is just correct it and you're back on track. I think that reduces the friction and the fear for people to try these things and give them a chance by orders of magnitude, at least one order of magnitude in my mind. Now, I think the difference between AI agents and the full self-driving example, or even I think, Steven, and the way that you guys are approaching this, is that whenever someone tries to make operator-like promise, which is anything, like we can do anything on your behalf, that starts to get you to be like, okay, even if they did this one thing really well and they did the second thing really well and they did the third thing really well, I'm still not comfortable about the fourth thing at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's where specialized AI agents is where I suspect the market is going to feel more receptive to start. And I think my understanding of what your guys' initial approach to this is that if I have a product, and let's say my thesis as the founder of this company that's building this product or the head of product for this company, I have a thesis that my users, instead of needing to learn how to find all the nooks and crannies in my product to be able to do what they want to do, maybe they just want to converse with something that will either point them exactly where they need to go or even do the thing that they want it to do for them. And therefore, I can have a more narrowed scope for the implementation of that AI, which probably gets me to feel much more comfortable, much faster than a big, broad promise. That's at least how does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Yeah, it feels like you're like part of the team and you've seen some of the stuff we're working on, because that's like the approach we're taking. Like we want to make it very easy for companies to add like a chat interface to any app. And also, because we don't want the AI to hallucinate and stuff, we also want to make it easy for the engineering teams at those companies to define in an easy way. Like it might sound a bit overcomplicated the way I frame it, but like in an easy way, being able to define the kind of actions that the AI can take in a product, navigate to a page, go write a document there. But also maybe it's going to be about like making a report about, I don't know, if you're building a marketing tool, like being able to get insights into a campaign or something like that, I think could be quite powerful. So those are some of the things that we're trying to enable. But it's interesting because like every app is like there's so many different use cases, and that's a challenge for us, I would say. Every app is different. And we're trying to look at them into like different use cases, and we want to make sure we're able to get them right. And definitely a challenge for us. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm also imagining, and this might be wrong, is that, you're probably talking to a ton of customers right now as part of that discovery process. And I almost would imagine that you're dealing with two types of buckets of customers. One where maybe the higher ups are like, hey, we need to do something about AI, go find a problem that you can use AI with. For the second camp, which probably is the better one, is like, hey, like there's this big problem that we're dealing with or we're trying to solve, and I think actually AI could be the perfect solution for it. Yeah, I'm curious, like, is that what you're seeing? And like, what would we say is the distribution of those, and how are you like navigating the different calls depending on where they are in those camps?
You have a pretty good rate, to be honest. That's what I'm saying. Like, one of the reasons also like where we're investing in AI is because the reality is that every company or like every board meeting out there, they're all talking about like, we need to do something with AI. That's just what's going on. And so then companies are like trying to figure out what that means for their product and their users and like what they need to do. And so there's a good amount of companies coming to us trying to figure out like what they need to do. But often they have a pretty good opinion already. Like they see patterns, they see stuff that their users are struggling with or like areas that could be improved. For instance, we have a customer that wants to use AI it's like not really a self product today. And so they have a lot of people managing those customers. And so they just want to make the product a little bit more self-serve. And so one way to do this is to add an AI copilot in there to do some of the stuff that like customer success was doing for them. So that's one way you could think about it. So it's a mix of both. Definitely some companies come with just want to invest in AI. We don't exactly know what it is. And we do like almost a workshop with them to figure out like, here are the areas in which you could apply this to, almost like a design sprint, and some others that have a bit more of an opinionated approach. And all different use cases. It's quite interesting. Like I think there's a good use case for this read-only patterns, I feel like, where it's like the AI is just there to help you onboard on the product or read data and create reports and things like that. And you have other use cases where it's more, no, I want the AI to actually be like my intern or like, I don't know, like somebody, like an entity that can do stuff for me in this app, like create documents or whatever the case might be.
I'm almost imagining like tools like, I'm sure Salesforce has to be working on stuff like this, but I've sometimes shadowed some of my sales partners when they navigate a tool like Salesforce, and the sheer number of fields that have to get populated for different things that are not automatically populated. Maybe the step isn't to automate, that's the dream, but if at least there could be just like a central like chat interface that's just talk to this client, they said this, they said this and this, can you just update all the necessary fields on that like customer based on that conversation or something? Like, is that an example of the way people want to offer their customers the ability to engage with AI in the product or with chat?
Yeah, I see. One of the big use case we're seeing is like what I described earlier. It's more like, go find this data for me and create reports in the product. So very much read only. That's a big one. We also have a good amount of people that have text editor interface in the product. And that's something we support at Liveblocks, like even before we started working on this. So being able to have a collaborative text editor. And a good amount of companies that have those text editors are looking for a way to make it easier to like create those documents, populate the data in those documents, generate summaries. There's some basic stuff there, but there's also like cases of like, if you think about some of the, I don't know if you have to write public content, Ben or Mark, like if you write a blog post or things like that.
All the time, for LinkedIn especially.
What do you do when it's ready? You probably ask somebody for feedback, right? You're like, hey, can you?
Not anymore. But
not anymore.
I asked Claude.
Yeah, there you go. Imagine if you could ask Claude in the product and then Claude is able to like leave annotations and suggestions for you. That's one thing that we tend to see as well. Like there's a good demand for those kind of like deeper, narrow use cases that require a bit more like it's like a deeper integration with more, it's like a more opinionated approach about how you should implement those collaborative workflows with AI. I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying, but
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
That makes sense to me. Ben, you were going to say something.
I'm thinking about how Mark and I actually don't have a collaborative writing workflow, even though there is a decent like Venn diagram overlap between a lot of the kinds of things that we write about. Like every time we record an episode, we publish a post about it, but we don't have a collaborative workflow. We're touching each other's posts and anything like that. Each of us has our own vertical workflow, our own stack for doing that. And I was just thinking about a world in which, like, I guess, like co-authoring that kind of content using a combination of like real collaboration with humans, but also collaboration with AI would work. I'm curious what the other teams are doing. Every time I've worked on collaborative posts, it's usually been in like a Google Doc, but that's just people. And that there's not a way that AI embeds into a Google Doc right now where I could ask it to reframe a sentence based on someone's comment. That would be interesting.
That's one thing we're thinking about doing, like integrating AI as like another user almost that can just make suggestions that then a human can approve or decline. And basically the flows, like what you have in like Claude, when you create like a document, you're able to like annotate and do things like doing this, but with more like multiple people, more like what you used to in a tool like Google Docs, basically. So
I think the context is so critical, right? Like when you think about leveraging AI, let's say I use, gosh, I probably at this point use dozens of different tools throughout my weekly workflow to just get everything done. And even if each of these tools had their own native AI assistant, none of those tools would have like access to my context bank that I could bring in to those all those tools. And I think that as a user, that creates just like all kinds of frustrations for me today. I wish I could just maintain like a context bank about what I care about, and then just like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Just be able to bring that wherever I go.
I would pay a lot of money for that product. Basically like a product that you have all your context, and then that it also like automatically, like maybe every 30 minutes, like pulls and pushes that context to like the relevant tools that I'm using.
But sometimes you don't want that context as well. That's a challenge I find sometimes. I don't know.
I want it available though, just in case.
Yeah, exactly. But like sometimes I do stuff like for instance, like for work, for instance, like when I use ChatGPT or Claude or something, and I want the AI to have all the context about what I do, what Liveblocks is, and all the stuff that I've talked about in the past, because it makes the content better and more suited to who I am. But sometimes like I want to start fresh. And I find that quite difficult to manage. And maybe I'm not using the tools in the right way, maybe, but
I kind of view starting like an agnostic brand new chat in Claude, like opening an incognito tab in Chrome or Safari. It's like sometimes I'm just like single use case, don't want this. I just want it like when I'm doing testing on dev, for example, or like I'm testing a flow of a product. Like I don't want it to know any cookies. I don't want it to have any history, just like brand new right here. Yeah. So that's how I think about using brand new chats in Claude. But to be honest, I'd say 95% of my chats in Claude are within the context of a project.
Yeah, same.
Like not using it for just random chats. Like I go to Google, I still actually go to Google I find that Gemini is not bad at just like random questions or just, what do you think about this? For some reason I go there first.
Yeah. I think, so going back to what you were saying, Steven, of you see this almost like two use cases, right? Like the use case of, hey, like get me this context about this thing that I need, like that read-only use case. And then there's almost like the generative use case of, hey, like based on the information that you have, create this report or maybe a PRD, whatever that might be. I almost feel like those are to me expected now. Like I'm like, yeah, like that's almost like table stakes. I think the use cases that I keep getting more and more excited about are the ones where actually like they will reduce my cognitive load, right? And the way I think can do that is surfacing information that I don't know that I need, but I need, right? Like, for example, like, hey, if I'm a sales rep, be like, you have a quota of, I don't know, like 200,000 this month, you are only at 50. And based on like the call volume on your conversion, you really need to go from 30 calls to 40 calls. Almost proactively telling me, hey, if you don't change this, or if you don't do this, you might get in trouble. And here are the things that you should do. And I'm curious, like, why are we not seeing more products do more of that? Is it just it's a hard problem to solve? Is it just maybe not the P0? Yeah. What do you think that is?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And to be honest, I don't think this is something like we're aiming to solve just yet ourselves. But like I totally see what you're doing. Like just you're basically talking about making the product way smarter and like just guessing what you need as a user so that you don't have to think too much and do all those manual tasks. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't have too much insights into this.
Like a sales coach or kind of like a proactive suggestion kind of tool. I'm guessing like sales tools have some kind of coaching that are starting to emerge inside of them that help salespeople. I think there's definitely a use case I've seen where like it listens to your calls, whether it's in Gong or in something else, and tells you like, bro, you talk too much on this call. Like you want the customer to do 70% of the talking.
It shows you the percentage that we should talk
less, right?
But that's like a very specific pigeonholed use case almost that I'm like, yeah, almost those tools, that's what they're really good at. But I'm talking more about those like horizontal tools where it's just a CRM, right? Like another use case maybe to make it more kind of like applicable to everyone is, let's say I'm a new employee at a company that uses Notion, for example, right? And I would expect Notion at some point to, based on the information that I share about this new hire, right? Hey, they just joined the product team and they are part of this specific team within the product team. to all of a sudden be like, hey, welcome to the team. Here are the 5 most important documents or databases that you need to become familiar with. And here's why. Almost like that proactiveness of, hey, I understand your context. I understand where you fit into the puzzle. Let me help you be more effective and proactively tell you, here are the things that are, it's almost, like maybe a more intelligent
So
copilot.
I think the problem with that, and I've actually spent a couple months doing customer discovery on the problem of solving the non-HR version of employee onboarding a few years ago. So every company, like I talked to probably a dozen people at different companies, no one has the problem solved of how do you consistently onboard people to their space. What we have solved is how to get people paid, like bank account, employment verification, all that stuff. But so my take is that if humans don't have a good solution to something, then we have to have a really good thesis about why AI can do it better. So if as your onboarding buddy, I don't even do a good job of figuring out how to get you set up for success as a human who's been at the company for a couple of years, my confidence that AI can do that better is not very high. Does that make sense? Because like, how does it know what you should know if even I don't know what you should know and I'm literally working at the company?
I guess basically what you're saying is that you need to have a really good process in place already, and then you need to be purposeful about what that looks like, so that then an AI can learn and know how to do this even better. But if you start from something pretty crappy, I don't know. Yeah.
Like I've onboarded so many people in my career, and it's always starts with some flavor of, here's our latest thinking on this thing that we want you to own. Feel free to throw all of it away. None of it is gospel, but we want you to like use it as inputs for you to think about what you think we should do. And I'll be your resource to ask all the questions. So maybe AI can be like that, play a huge role in helping someone just do a lot of that ping pong of just learning question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. And whenever there's no answer available, it could be like, here's the right person to ask. And like, it could point you to the person who maybe has the closest proximity to that space and the semantic space. Almost like if you think about like similarity scores for like between employee and question, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's basically what I was thinking, right? Especially like at a big company like Meta, right? There's so many documents and things you can read, right? But there's definitely like, if you want to get up to speed in the fastest way possible, here are like 4 or 5 that you have to read, basically.
I think something that will be really useful there, and there's some tools like coming out. I think the founder of Slight, I don't know if it's like used to be like a Notion competitor, but he built like a new tool where, I forgot the name of it. I think it's called Ask. But maybe I could be wrong.
It's a good name.
Sounds like the right name for it.
Like
but it's basically like, I don't know if you have this problem, but like when I started Liveblocks, I had a very clean Notion. Like pages were well organized. You had the teams and all that. Now it's a mess, right? Every time I just create a new document and I don't even think about where it goes. And I think that's probably the way I assume like most companies work. At some point, there's just too much content. You don't even know where to put it. Or maybe I'm just very disorganized. I don't know. But like having a place where you can like easily ask, it's basically like you're the brain of the company. Like I'd love to have a tool that's like, you are the brain of the company. I can ask you anything and you know what I'm allowed to see, what I'm not allowed to see. And like based on that, you're able to give me all of those answers like super quickly. There are tools starting to build this, but like I think that would be an amazing business for sure. Like I would definitely use this.
What seems like a big missed opportunity right now is we talk a lot on the podcast about how much we love Claude projects, for example. And one of the things about Claude projects is that you're going to feed it all the context about that you think it needs to know about your company and your team and your product area and whatever, so that you could jump into a chat and it's useful. And sometimes I just have this moment where I realize, if you imagine like a 10,000 person company or even 1,000 person company, and let's just assume everyone's like being AI forward. So everyone's like adopting these tools and trying to use something like Claude projects to chat with it. And everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's like repeating the building of their understanding of, it's like their entire perspective of that company brain, right? Or their product brain. And there's no ability to like just import company brain and then feed additional context, enrich it with more
different
context.
layers of like context, like all companies.
Correct.
And you have like sub projects almost that you need.
I think that would go a long way. And then like Mark and I, for example, if I wanted to have a project for the Supra podcast that was for like my stuff, and he wanted to have a Supra podcast project for his stuff, but we had a shared Supra podcast like knowledge that we could, I think that would be really interesting. Anyways, that was a digression from the main conversation, but I felt like getting that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe another thing that, Steven, I'm curious how you think about is, I feel like the cool part about building a company like Liveblocks is that it almost forces you to live in the future a little bit, because like you have all these customers that trust you to know what they're going to need. For example, like you start in the collaboration space, right? And like they kind of trust you, be like, hey, when a new trend or pattern comes by, Liveblocks is going to solve it for me, and they're going to have something out of the box that works. Or with AI, right? They're trusting you to like really be on top of the revolution, so they can always have access to the latest and greatest. So I'm curious, like, how are you doing that? How are you living in the future, and how do you keep yourself inspired?
That's a great question, because I would say the first 4 years of the company, or 3.5 years of the company, let's say, our job has basically been to look at tools like Figma, Linear, Notion, Google Docs, and pretty much look at like the similar patterns that they all have, and let's try to reverse engineer what they've built and package it in a way that's very easy to implement. It's like they set the rules. They were like, this is the right pattern here, and we're just giving you this in a packaged way, turnkey, put it in your product. With AI, it's very different, right? Because this is a completely new field. And as you said, we have to tell them like what to do, and like we have to guess what the future is. So it's definitely more challenging for us, but it's also way more exciting, I find. For me personally, like I'm a designer, and like I love like thinking about the experience, what it should be. And my big take, right, and what I tell the team all the time is, this is more my opinion than anything else, right? But I think the best way to integrate AI, especially in our context, is to treat AI as like an entity that you need to collaborate with. And so it needs to be very familiar for people, yet they need to also understand that this is not a human, like it's different. So it has like little differences, but I do think it needs to become familiar so people actually adopt it and they're not like confused by it. And it needs to be very clear what the AI is doing in real time. Always, you need to have this feedback loop, and you need to also make it very easy for humans to interact with it and be like, hey, no, stop. Like, I need to confirm, I need to validate this. So you need to like think about all those workflows so that the AI just doesn't take over and you have no control over it. So I think it comes from like having a vision of what you think the future should be, right? That's just my opinion on what I think it should be. And I think this is probably what the best DX is, from my opinion. And it's also looking at what the like tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and all those companies are doing, because they keep coming up with patterns and frameworks. There's MCP that came out. There's like a bunch of new things that come out, protocols and things like that. So we need to pay close attention to what's going on there, to try to pick and choose some of those patterns and see how they would fit into that vision that we set originally ourselves. A good example of that, just to hopefully make it a bit clearer for the audience, is OpenAI Operator. As soon as I saw OpenAI Operator, I was like, no, this is the way you interact with it as a human makes sense. You ask it to do something, and then you see the AI, what the AI is doing. I don't think the execution is right, but there are patterns in there that I think make sense, right? And being able to talk to the AI, to tell it what to do, complete sense. This is what you do with a human. If I want you to do something, like I'll ask you, and then being able to see what the AI is doing, like in Operator, you see the cursor going around. I think that makes a ton of sense. In the context of a product, like being able to see what the AI is doing, like typing, streaming content in, that feedback loop, I think is key. So like I'm trying to take inspiration from like different products and see how that fits into the vision that we set. So that's one way. And then lastly, the last piece of this is obviously to talk to customers, or prospects, I should say. What problems do you have? What are you trying to do here? I know you want to invest in AI, but what does that mean? What problems do you want to solve? And so when you talk to, at this point, I've talked to like hundreds of companies wanting to do these things, you start to see patterns of like, oh, this kind of use case is sort of similar. And you start of bucketing them out into like different use cases. And you try to see which use case should we focus on first, because it's hard to get them all right. And even on top of the use case, another big challenge for us is like the tech stack, right? Every app is different. Some apps are built with Next or React. Some are built in like different frameworks. And that's one of the big challenge with Liveblocks, is that we have to have an opinion and design the experience for the end user, but we also have to design the experience for the developers actually implementing that in those products. And that's,
you could argue that's what makes Stripe. That's what makes Stripe so successful, right? Is just incredible developer documentation, developer experience.
That's a big focus for us. Like developer experience is everything in a dev tool. And what I find particularly challenging with dev tools companies, and this is my first dev tools company, I worked in design tools in the past, so very different. But what's challenging with dev tools is that you don't have a single app that people go to, and that's your experience. The experience that people have is stretched across so many surfaces. Documentation, when they are in Cursor or VS Code, when they start typing things, like what do you show in that little popover, like type ahead? Like you want to make sure you have documentation embedded in there so people understand the sort of API they need to use. The way you name the APIs, it has to be, the words that you use have to be what people will think about naturally when they use them. And then you have a dashboard, right? Also, there's so many touch points that makes it very, very challenging.
You know what? Sorry, go ahead, Mark. I have a follow-up that's unrelated to that exact topic. Okay. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I think it's actually a really interesting time to be building for developers, right? Because you have like tools like Windsurf, Cursor, even like at the other spectrum, right? Like Lovable, Bolt, like Versal, Replit. This is maybe like too futuristic, but we could live in a world where actually like APIs don't really matter. And maybe like you could have almost like PMs that just build a tool, right? And like, so how are you thinking about that? Because I could almost imagine a version of the future where your edge for Liveblocks is like, hey, if I integrate really well with things like Lovable or Replit, right? Like all of a sudden you get like world-class collaboration, world-class AI agent in my product. Absolutely. In a way that's super easy, right? So it's like, how do you think about that? Because I think that's like, almost like you could jump like 100%. It's a risky bet, but it's an interesting one.
I think AI is a massive tailwind for us for two reasons. For me, AI multiplies the number of entities people need to collaborate with. Instead of having, 7 or 8 billion people on Earth, you basically have an infinite amount of entities you need to collaborate with. So that's great for us. But then I also think like AI is basically, it multiplies the number of developers that can actually implement those things, basically our customers. So it multiplies the customers of our customers and multiplies our customers' potential. And I think this is where we're so greatly positioned, because if you make your product so easy to use, like in tools like Vizero or like the tools that you mentioned, like so that anybody can start building those kind of experiences, then that's great. All you have to do is ask, can you build this app with a commenting system for me? And then if the AI is able to then automatically use the Liveblocks APIs to generate this for you, that's incredible. That's an amazing distribution channel for us. So the way we think about doing this, it's like AI SEO in a way, which I don't think I've cracked yet. There's still a lot to learn there, but I do think if you have a great documentation, there's already some like frameworks and that start to emerge. There's like LLMs.txt. That's like an extension that you add to when you upload into your domain, and like then the AIs are able to understand how to browse the documentation, that sort of thing. That helps. And there's a new protocol that's coming out now. It looks like Sam Altman just tweeted about this yesterday. They're going to add this into ChatGPT. MCP. It's basically a way to, I'm sure you're familiar with it, basically define kind of.
We haven't talked about it on the podcast. So if you could define what it is, like that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm still new to this, but it's basically this new protocol that enables you to spec out how tools like Vizero, Cursor, ChatGPT for that matter, can interact with your APIs. And in the context of Liveblocks, like the MCP server, we're working on it right now. We want to make it very easy for DI to understand how to create rooms. Rooms in our context is like the way you create like those collaborative spaces in which you're all together and collaborating together. Creating comments, basically telling the AI how it's supposed to use our API. It's like an interface layer for the AI to use basically any product.
So you're describing, what I'm hearing is, let's say a world in which I'm building a tool in Bolt, and let's say I'm building, just use a really simple example, a to-do list for families. So you add everyone in your family, it's a to-do list. And let's say I want Bolt it builds it and it looks great. And I'm like, cool, now I want to be able to see the avatar of my wife when she's looking at the list. Like show it somewhere on the screen when she's actually looking at it at the same time. Exactly. You guys probably have that out of the box available as like a collaboration feature. So it should know this is a type of collaboration feature, and it should be able to maybe look at Liveblocks and any other competitors that it would evaluate against and make a determination of which of them would create the best all-in experience for that specific use case in that point in time. And then you guys do a handshake behind the scenes using MCP to make it happen.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And there's also a case of AI SEO, so that your solution is actually the one that ends up being recommended by the tool. And I don't know, maybe at some point you don't even get recommended by the tool. It just decides for you, right? By default, it picks a default. I don't know. This is all new, right? I don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, but that'll be the dream, right? If you ask an AI to build a Figma-like app and it just automatically builds it with Liveblocks, that would be incredible for us. And so I always think about how we can be at the top of that list from like an AI SEO perspective. Yeah.
And I think that the really cool thing about it too is that when you use something like Liveblocks, right? Like I think where I've seen some of these like apps that get quickly built with prototypes go wrong is they skipped like the user research or really understanding what people need and kind of what's the best solution. The cool thing about using something like Liveblocks, right? It's like you're already, by using the product, you're already shortcutting that because you guys have done that for them. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more companies that start building these building blocks because I think it's just so smart. And I think it can really shortcut how quickly you build, especially like things that are complex, right? I think there's simple things like a widget or a graph that's a lot easier, but things that are like, there's a lot of moving pieces, there's nuance, there's notifications, there's things that are technically complex. Like it just makes so much sense, right?
Same for Stripe, when you think about it. It's like, why are you going to build your own like payment system and figure out all the flows to handle payment and billing and all that stuff? Like
emails.
Let Stripe do it. They've done the research and nobody wants to touch this. I think it's the same thing for collaboration and probably AI copilots. I think like having features, ready-made features that you like, features as a service almost, that you can easily put into your product makes a ton of sense, I think, because we spend a lot of time like literally spending hours like looking at how Slack notifications work or like how like Notion notifications work. There's a lot of edge cases. We just do that research basically for you. So I think there's a lot of space for those kind of pre-built components and like features that companies can quickly add to their products. Like there's Stripe for payment. I guess there's Liveblocks for collaboration. There's like Clerk for auth. There's more and more companies, I think, investing in this space.
And then how do you differentiate yourself then at that point? Because if everyone's using all these building blocks, then what makes you special?
You mean for the companies using the same building blocks?
Yeah. Like, let's say like, all of a sudden, let's assume we live in a world maybe in 2 to 3 years where there's just like a building block for everything, right? And how do you then...
Like an open source building block for everything?
Damn, this is getting
not for everything, but like maybe for the technical things that are hard, right?
It's like gluing things together.
Let's assume it's in a world where a lot of people are using like more of these building blocks, right? And they're using the same ones. Like, how do you then differentiate? Like, how do you think about people differentiating and creating like this product that people love and that has a unique taste and feel to it?
So I think there's a couple of things here. I think you will only see building blocks of like common patterns, like commodities at this point, like things like comments, like that. It's just one experience. You expect it to be the same everywhere. Logging into an app, probably the same, right? Just kind of the same experience throughout.
Maybe not the place to reinvent the wheel when you're building a product is your login page. Yeah,
exactly. Payment, probably the same thing, right? You don't want to reinvent the wheel there. So I think there's like areas that become commodities and it's not a thing in which you will differentiate yourself. But I think the core of the app, like it's basically the core of your business. Like what problem are you solving for people? That's like, that all will always be there and that will always be the differentiator, I would say. But then, okay, let's assume you have two competing products that both use Liveblocks. You can still customize a lot of stuff, right? And that's one thing that I think we particularly do well and differently than other companies is that our components are like extremely customizable. And so there's different ways you can integrate Liveblocks. There's a default way in which you just use like the pre-built components that we have, and you're going to have a commenting panel, for instance, that looks a certain way. You can still customize the colors, the spacing, and some of those things, but it's going to look fairly similar across different tools. If you want, there's another layer of abstraction that you can use. It's a lot more granular, and we basically give you the primitive components. It's like a lower level of abstraction so that you can actually compose things yourself at a much lower level of abstraction. And so you can decide, you know what, I don't want to have avatars here in this comment panel. I want to use my own. Or instead of having this send button here, I want to use something custom that I have for my own design system. And I think Stripe also does this really well, right? If you want to use Stripe, like the easiest way is to use like checkout, right? And it's like a script tag, and it will always look the same across every app. It's like you click the button, pop-ups open, and you can pay. But if you want, you can go deeper, right? You can use they have like components for like entering credit card details. And you can put that into your own UI and it will look super unique to your own product. They also released, like maybe a year or two ago, they launched this kind of external tool. It's like an entire page in which you can manage billing and see your subscriptions, see all of your invoices from the past. It's like literally hosted on their domain. Like it's like a different website. It saves a ton of time. So by default, you can integrate this. But then if you want, you also have the APIs and the components to sort of like rebuild some of that stuff yourself in your app, right? So it all depends. I think if you want to really invest, like you can start with something easy at first that just works out of the gate. And then as you see fit, you can start moving that back into something that's a bit more customizable and more true to your brand.
Yeah, to me, the value of something like using a single holistic solution like Liveblocks versus a bunch of individual kind of like open sourced Lego blocks is that, especially when it comes to collaboration, I remember at Abstract when we were building a lot of the collaborative fabric of the product, it started with basically just the ability to comment on something and have a notification bell ding. And then it's like, cool, well, we probably also want emails because if someone's not in the product, we need to tell them about it. And we want the content in the email to match the content of the notification, and we want both of the contents of both of those to match the content of the comment itself that started all of that. Yeah. And then we also want the ability to have some kind of feed maybe that allows us to see this series of activities that have existed at the level of this thing, but also this thing exists inside of a project. So I want to be able to like maybe zoom out and see all the activity across the project. So it's almost like a thread that once you start pulling on the notification thread, there's 3 other things that pop up. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. Yeah, whack this here and these two. So I think being able to like use a tool that helps you orchestrate the different touch points, the collaboration touch points of the product in a way that stays up to date with the latest patterns that people are using seems to me like probably the best differentiator, the reason as a product person. And then I think as a developer, like you've talked about, Steven, the developer experience is probably going to win, all things equal. So not that I couldn't keep talking about this topic for a long time because I think it's super interesting, but I wanted the thing I was going to ask earlier, which is just like top of mind for me, is I'm noticing something really interesting about you, Steven. It's like you're building a dev tools company. You're a designer. And are you also like technical by background? Are you like technically an engineer too?
So when I was a teenager, I think I was 13 or 14, I started like building websites. That's how I got into like design by accident. I love building stuff. I love building experiences, but I like the experience that people like using an app, or I like the visual aspect of things, almost the front end of the app, right? I like creating those tools. And so I've always loved building stuff. I then studied computer science. I ended up dropping out of this, never really finished my study. And turns out my first job was actually as a web developer, but as part of a UX team. And thankfully, I made the transition to UX because I was in that team and I just loved designing the experience. And I basically didn't like being told what to build. So I preferred like designing the experience and like thinking about the problems we wanted to solve than the other way around. And so that's why I ended up going into design. And I did most of my career in like product design, like different startups, InVision, started a couple of companies before, and with a strong focus in design tools. I built a company called Easy that was like an animation tool for designers. And the idea was that I worked with designers at a company called Campaign Monitor, and none of them could code. And so I was the guy to create the prototypes for them, to create the animations, because back then there was like no tools to do that. And so I created this tool to make it very easy for them to like create animations without having to code and being able to export the CSS from it. That's how I ended up working at InVision later on InVision Studio. And so I was still doing design, but always been hybrid, doing a bit of code and design. But Liveblocks is definitely another level in terms of like engineering. And so I would definitely not be able to do all that stuff on my own. I've been working with a super talented team, and like my co-founder was incredible, and also met him at InVision. And so, yeah, I wouldn't take the credit for all that dev complexity, but yeah, definitely.
There's 2 kind of different places that my curiosity is pulling me. So if one of these is more interesting, feel free to tell me. But one is why we don't see more designers start companies and found companies, which I think is probably not as common as I would personally like to see more designers start companies. And then the second is, when you have an idea now, do you start in Figma? Do you start in Bolt? Like, where do you go to just start expressing your ideas as a designer?
Yeah, Ben, I'm more interested in that second part because as he was talking, I was like wondering the same question of one, what is his design process for someone who's like, can prototype, but also can design. And then also like, we can touch the Figma topic. I think that would also be really interesting.
So I don't know enough design nowadays, to be honest, but I strangely still like when I think about the vision, when I need to like do deep work about where I think the company is going, I actually often work in Figma. I do a mix of Figma and Notion, a lot of wording, like thinking about where I want to go. I sometimes do that writing in Figma as well, surprisingly, because I think very visually. When I think about the experience, I start to put it together into a visual form. And so for me, thinking about a vision of where we need to go, I like to do that in a visual way. Then when it comes to building stuff, not that I do a lot of that nowadays, but I pretty quickly go into code. It depends. I haven't thought about this too much, but I think it's more the kind of problem I need to solve. The medium will change. Sometimes it's going to be like writing is so helpful for me, like just writing things down help me think. And my head is a mess. And so writing helps me organize it in a way that can be digested by other people. Putting things visually also helps me. Like an idea is as good as like how well you're able to convey it, and being able to visually explain something, to me, I think is super powerful, especially when you start a company and you need to like bring people along with you. I think that's key. And sometimes we have an existing product. There are stuff that don't quite work. I'll just go straight in code because that's the easier way to think about this problem. So I would say it depends.
Do you use tools like Bolt at all?
Not so much. I played around with V0, Bolt, or like those kind of tools. I don't think I'm the right... I don't know. Do you guys use it?
I have been for probably 2 weeks. I think I kind of had my light bulb moment with how it fits for me and how I like to use it.
What do you use
Mark?
it for?
Yeah, probably like about a month.
Yeah, if people are interested, they can go back and listen to our episode with Colin Matthews, who came on. And I think that conversation actually helped me. Mm-hmm. It was kind of the moment that took me from like, I'm scared of full self-driving to like, oh, this is cool. I think this is approachable. I use it because I have a part-time PM gig that I do for 10, 15 hours a week. And that has an existing product that sometimes the founder comes to me and he's like, I'd love to just get your thoughts on how we might do this or something. And so now I can take a screenshot of the part of the product where that exists or where that might go. And then I can go into Bolt, I can drop the screenshot in there and I can say, hey, I'd like you to rebuild this. And then I have some ideas on how to improve this page. Walk me through your plan before you write any code. It goes through, it tells me what the plan is. It rebuilds it. It looks like a shitty version of the screenshot that I gave it, but all the basic pieces are there. And then I'm like, cool, now make it like look more like the screenshot. So then it gets it to be maybe like 80% of the screenshot, good enough. And then I'm like, cool, I'm thinking about an idea for doing this. And I think it should live somewhere on this page. Could you help me brainstorm some potential options for how this could potentially coexist with the current content of this page? And then it gives me, and I say, don't code yet, just give me ideas. And then it will give me different ideas. And I'll be like, cool, let's explore that first idea. And then it walk me through your plan before you code it. And then it gives me the full implementation plan of that idea first. And then I say, cool, do it. And then it works for like a minute or two. And what I see is an idea that we just came up with in the product. And then I can take that idea and start playing with it. And then once I get to a point where I'm like, oh, this is interesting, then I can go back to the founder and be like, I think this might be one way we could do this. What do you think? So the ability to do that whole workflow without involving designers or engineers or anything is one way I've been playing with it.
Yeah. Like I think the most useful part is that you're just able to have way more conversations about one idea because you're just like the time from like idea to prototype. And even if you were like one of the best designers in the world, right? Like you still have to create like each screen in Figma, each interaction, then create a prototype. With this is, I don't know, like 10 minutes of playing around, you have a clickable prototype that it might not be as good or as high fidelity as a Figma prototype. At least you can have, exactly. And you can do the same with customers.
You can deploy it. So the craziest thing, Mark, I showed this at the hackathon. People gasped because Supra recently had a hackathon in New York where we just played with AI tools for a couple hours. But when I showed people what you could do with a Bolt, like you go from a screenshot to like maybe 10 back and forths to like having something clickable, you could click the deploy link. And then it creates literally a link that you could just open in the browser and start clicking around. You don't have to set up any hosting or anything. It's just like there.
It's amazing.
So that ability, I think, is pretty wild.
Yeah. And the cool thing that people do too, because of the way it works, you can also add analytics to that prototype too. So not only you're just getting the qualitative like feedback from customers, we can be like, oh, like actually they seem to be clicking a lot in this button. There might be something here that's like capturing their attention.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to double click here or something.
That makes a ton of sense. I think one reason I don't use it is because the nature of what we do at Liveblocks, it's a dev tools.
Yeah.
We have no product. I mean, we have no we have a dashboard, but the dashboard is basically like analytics and like a way to see things, and like we could use it for that. I think if we wanted to prototype different ideas on how to visualize things, or like how could this UI look like? What could we do here to, I don't know, enable a specific pattern or whatever? Those are not the kind of problems I'm like mostly thinking about day to day nowadays. But like, I could see how it would be super helpful for like, you have a SaaS product, like an actual UI, like a dashboard you go to, and like being able to prototype super quickly. That's like incredibly helpful.
Yeah. Imagine the Riverside UI that you're looking at right now when we're recording this. You could take a screenshot of that UI and you could feed it into Bolt, and you could be like, I'm thinking about during the call, I'd like people to have the ability to do this or something. Could you help me like see what that might look like? And you could go from that idea to like something that kind of fits it understands the design pattern because it knows what the language looks like, and then just gives you some ideas, and you could experiment with that pretty quickly.
Yeah. But I totally get it why I think probably is not as useful in the Liveblocks example. It's just you guys are working at a level that's like maybe one or two abstractions removed to the point that it's just going to be not efficient to be like, hey, we actually only really care about this like little cursor and kind of the way it's like interacting. It's just probably very annoying too. And I could see why it's more efficient to be in Figma. But maybe going back to I do think the product process and how people build product is like completely changing. And I think I'm always curious to see like what other people are doing. And I'm picking up that your product process is a little bit different. So do you write PRDs, or it sounds like maybe you just write like the problem? Like how do you, like when you're thinking, hey, like we need to improve this, or we need to build a new feature, like how do you go about it?
I don't directly myself, but we have a product manager on the team that writes like specs sometimes. So like kind of like is kind of what we need to build. But because a product is a very technical product, and again, there's two things, right? There's the end users and there's our users that implement the thing. And so those are developers. Because the actual product itself that we sell is developers end up using it. One of the challenge I think is that the people responsible for the developer experience are the engineers for the most part. And we need to have engineers with a super strong like product and design sense to understand like what's needed. On the good side though, and what's probably easier is that they're also building a product for themselves, right? Not that they necessarily would need to build a collaborative app themselves, but they understand what the developer would like. So they have taste in that sense. So I know we write like engineering specs for pretty much everything that we have to build. It's a mix of product spec and an engineering spec. And for me, like when it's more, for example, AI copilots, which is more like a bigger initiative, like I'll handle all of that stuff myself. And the way I think about it is more like I write and I also put stuff in Figma to explain a vision of why I want this to be, why this is a problem. Here's the vision for this product, how that ties into the company's vision, more like the end goal that I want this to be and the benefit for the businesses that could potentially use this, and also what that looks like for the end user. And so for that, I would write like a vision kind of document mixed with slides and visuals that I would typically create in Figma to be able to tell that story in a way that's compelling and that gets people on board. And then I work with the engineers. Does that make sense? Is that aligned with how you're thinking about this? And we kind of collaborate on this to make it better and make it something that can actually be built and become reality eventually.
Your background as a designer and your ability to visually, I think, convey that direction and that vision is such a superpower. I can't tell you how many founders I know who wish that it's almost like they keep banging their head against the wall. Like, how do I get the rest of my team to see what's in my head? But they're not visually oriented or visually skilled the way that you are, because they come from some different backgrounds. So I can imagine that's a superpower in getting people to like see what you're seeing and to move in that direction. Do you agree?
I don't know if I would call it a superpower, but that would be a bit presumptuous. But I think
do you find people like not understanding what you're picturing? Because like I'm imagining it's hard to misunderstand something you've put on a screen. right?
I think it's definitely been helpful. And as a founder and as a CEO of a company or leader, I think in any company, doesn't have to be the CEO. It's so important that you're able to convince people and bring people along with you so that they align and they know where you're going. You need to all be going the same direction, and definitely being able to communicate that clearly through visuals, through documents, through all hands, through messages on Slack. It's so key. It's like probably the most important thing for my job. My job is basically like I repeat myself all the time in different form factors. That's basically what I do. I have all hands, I have like meetings there, one-on-ones, and I repeat the same stuff basically all day long. And like,
Yeah.
I think you need to actually repeat yourself in like different form factors because people you need to repeat it for people to get it. And it might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but that's one thing I've learned is like over communicate in writing, by speaking, Loom videos, all kinds of like repeating the same story definitely helps. And being able to convey that visually, I think it helps a ton. People react to visual better, I think, generally speaking. It depends on the kind of people you're talking to. Like engineers sometimes also like they would prefer to see like a doc, maybe.
Yeah.
It depends.
They get too like fixated into like, ooh, like how are we gonna build this? And it's like they like start to see like how can I start decomposing this thing? And then it's just they cannot really see like the forest from the trees.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I had this very similar experience. Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to someone, I forgot who it was, but he was like, yeah, like the role of the CEO is just you're just sales, right? And but there's just different kind of sales, right? You have to sell your employees on your vision all the time. You have to sell new employees to come join you. You have to sell customers to buy your product. In a way, I think PMs and product leaders is the same way, right? You're selling. Yeah.
Leadership in any leadership role is no one has to follow you, right? We live in a free society. Like people choose where they want to go and what they want to spend their time on. So if someone's going to follow you, there's got to be a reason. And I think a good story and a good communicator, assuming some of the baselines are in place, like you're making enough money, like you like the work you're doing, but like the things that I think really make people feel excited about what they're doing is having some kind of vision that is like, I'm pumped about today because I know how today rolls to like next week. And I know how next week rolls into what we need to do by the end of the year. And I'm really excited about what we're going to do by the end of the year because here's the big thing we're all working towards, right? That's motivating.
Yeah.
I've also seen it play out conversely, which is if you're actually not excited about the long-term vision, it undermines your level of motivation on on today's level.
For sure.
So that's
How do you? I'm curious, like about you guys. Like, how do you handle that yourself? Like, obviously, you have to do part of your job is you have to convince people as well, right? Bring people on your team to follow. But are you comfortable like building, like putting stuff visually and like in a way that's happening, or how do you handle that? Do you think that would be super helpful if you were able to do that? Maybe you're already able to do that, or do you work with people to make it happen? Like, I'm curious to see like how do you make that work?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, my job now is there's less visual stuff, but I can talk about like my product role. And what Ben was describing of shit, like I have all these ideas and I wish I could put them out into a visual way. Like I felt that pain a lot of times. So what I did always is like I would try to find one or two designers that I was really close with that I knew I could convince them, hey, please help me bring this idea to life. And I think the good thing of that is that I think what you were getting at is, yes, I think being very good at putting something into visuals is helpful, but I think that's just like half of the battle. The other half of the battle is telling a really compelling, exciting story. So the storytelling. So I think I always felt like I could get the storytelling right. I just needed to find someone to help me make that turn out into life. So I think that's how I thought about it. I do think with the tools that are coming up, it's going to get easier and easier. And I wouldn't be surprised if like people are already able to build really cool visions with no like design support. Ben.
So even though I've diagnosed the problem, I don't think I haven't found like a way to, I was never like the 2-year visual vision guy, but I also found I diagnosed that very early. And similarly to Mark, I've learned that really strong partnerships with designers and people who are visually oriented, it was a superpower for me. But what I have found to be my most effective way of getting people to see what's in my head is to really bring them along on the thinking. So there's a big difference between everyone today is starting at square one, wherever that is on the board in their head, what they think is going on. And then I'm thinking about square 3 and square 4. If I just come to them and I tell them what square 4 looks like, everyone's going to be like, whoa, Like, how do we go from like square one that I'm standing at, which is a different part of the board, to like where you're showing up now at square four? Even if that's very inspiring and motivating, I don't know if I get excited about that as much as, so we start at square one. I think here's how we go from square one to square two, and here's the reasons, and anchor it in like real customer problems, real customer conversations, real trends. Mention the business, like the vision in some capacity, and say if getting from square one to square two will work out, then from two, it's a natural extension that we can then go to square three. And then square three opens up all kinds of opportunities. And the one I'm really excited about, which we'll figure that out when we get there, but one of those squares could end up being square four. And square four is, man, like I get so excited when I think about square four. It's resonating with investors. It's resonating with customers. It's, I think, where the market's heading. It could be wrong, but there's a clear progression of steps, like an axiomatic like leaps that could be made to get from square one to square four. And that's the kind of way that I get motivated when other people talk to me. So I try to think in that way with the people that I work with too.
And that's also another form of storytelling, right? But there's maybe what you're getting to is that also maybe involving them early in the process, right? Maybe you're talking to customers and be like, hey, listen to what these people are saying. It's interesting, right? That's like highlighting that there's a problem here, and then you following up with the evolution of that.
Your job is to build momentum as a leader, right? Like that's the ultimate job. And Scott Belsky is the one that kind of put this in my head. He repeated this on multiple podcasts that I've heard him talk on. But the job of a leader is to build momentum. What does it mean to build momentum? It means that you go from standing still to moving fast in the same direction. How do you go from standing still to moving fast in the same direction? You got to go a little bit faster, and you have to have a direction. And then you got to go faster and have a little bit more velocity, right? So, for example, sharing a customer conversation. Steven, if you're talking to hundreds of customers, sharing the recordings of the conversations with your team is a great way of building momentum.
I had a customer call, like, that was so spot on with what you're building. I just we just Fathom, made a clip, posted in this channel, and people are like, oh my God, they get excited. You build momentum when you keep doing the stuff. Basically, it's like there's a storyline, and like you find ways to fit it with like conversations or like whatever new data that you come across to get people rallied behind this story. This story is actually real and like it's happening.
Yeah, I think the last piece too for me is like authenticity. Like I think that's, if there's no authenticity, like I follow leaders where I'm like, it's just like, I just don't feel it in you. Like I don't even think you believe what you're saying.
But Mark, we can make money doing this. Isn't that compelling to you? We can make a lot of money if we just build this solution.
Like you can really tell. Like you can tell some people that just they have this amazing narrative. Like you could win an Oscar for this beautiful like vision, but if you just don't feel it in their voice, be like, yes, like the effort is pointless almost.
That's a really good point. Yeah, for sure. Have you come across like, maybe you can, I guess you can share on the podcast, but
we can anonymize
leaders. You feel like, oh my God, like this person doesn't even believe what they're saying.
Yeah, for sure. There's people, I'm convinced, like I don't know if you watch Severance, but I had this moment when I was watching one of the recent episodes of Severance where I was like, this is an interesting idea for a show, but like I wonder if people actually do show up as a very specific kind of person at work that is completely different than the kind of person they are outside of work. And I have definitely worked with people where it feels like when they're in the work setting, it's like I'm an agent of the company and everything that has to come out of my mouth has to reinforce whatever the company needs. It's not coming from like an authentic, like this is my creative calling to do this thing, but it's more of what's demanded of me by this role. And I think that can be that. I've never done well in those roles personally, but there are people like that thrive, I think, professionally in those roles.
Yeah, more of like the mercenary versus missionary almost. And you can see it in content too, by the way. Like I think you can go in LinkedIn or even podcasts, right? And I think you can just really tell like from people's voices or the way they're writing. It's like almost like there's no pride or just like piece of you in it in a way.
I get it. Yeah.
It's sad, you know, as like creative people.
I have to like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm too passionate sometimes, I think, to be honest.
I love it. I know we're already a few minutes long and I know it's getting late in Paris, which I'm very jealous about that you're there, by the way. But I think we would love to have you back on for a part 2 with the speed that things are moving. I think it would be awesome to revisit this maybe when you're further along on your AI journey at Liveblocks. But the 2 questions that we like to ask our guests as we wrap up are, 1, where can people learn more about you and what you're thinking about and working on? And then 2, how could our audience potentially be helpful?
Yeah, so you can learn about me. I try to post a bit more on LinkedIn and Twitter nowadays. So I'm on Twitter, or X, I should say, Steven Fabre or Steven Fabre for the Americans listening. And same thing on LinkedIn. You can find me there. And then what was the other question? I missed it. I forgot.
How can they be helpful?
Yeah.
How
If you
about the
want to
audience?
Yeah, I'm always happy to meet other passionate product people. So if you want to reach out, would love to chat. And if you're interested into the space that I'm focused on at the moment, which is collaboration and between humans and also AI, would love to chat. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Amazing. And then Ben, maybe for the round 2, we'll plan a Europe trip together and we'll do a live podcast in Paris.
Yeah, nice.
Yes,
well, Mark,
please.
you're
Sign me up.
Spain, right? Originally.
Yeah. So I go back at least 3 times a year, and Ben goes back to France maybe like once a year.
We should be in Europe in July. I should probably mostly in France. Yeah.
Great. Are you going to be in Paris?
My wife's family, her dad lives in Bretagne on the west coast of France, and then her mom lives just outside of Metz on the east side, near Luxembourg. So we usually fly into Paris and then just do a chaotic drive across the country.
Yeah, so we'll pick you up from the airport and we'll hit up the recording studio.
Would love it.
Amazing. Great. Awesome.
Well, that's a wrap.